can we welcome Andy with a little round of applause?
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. This is truly a museum that I love. And I do love small museums. I live in Los Angeles. We have huge, beautiful museums with an enormous amount of stuff. But they are interested, for the most part, in the large things of the world. And the beautiful thing about the small local museums is that they focus on the real and important history of all of the thousands of places, around this country, around the world for that matter, that are wonderful to know about. So I was very pleased to meet Sharla and to meet everybody else and to begin to be associated with this place. So what I'm going to start with is a video that I made during COVID back in 2020. I was invited to be a guest artist at a thing called Photo LA. And the problem was it wasn't going to be a live show. I mean, we all know how to put the pictures into picture frames and take them down and hang them on the walls. But this one was going to be, a virtual show. And in a moment of madness, I said to the person who had offered me the show, I think I could make 5 videos from 5 different bodies of work. And they said, the show opens in 30 days. And I said, yeah, I think I can still do it. And then I hung up the phone and I said, oh my God, what have I done? So I got several friends involved. And so a cinematographer, a woman named Svetlana Svetko, shot me reading stories. These things had to be simple in order to make them quickly. I got 3 different editors involved, and in just under 5 weeks, we managed to put together 5 videos. I'm going to show you one of them today, and specifically this one is about museums. And it's about making something out of nothing. It's about, well, I'm not going to preface this one. Let's just watch it and see. Let's take that. In Los Angeles, museums have been shuttered since March. I've been going to them anyway, even though they're closed. And I've been making pictures of them to remember what life is like right now. When the museums closed, it started me thinking about them, about how dark and beautiful they'd be all closed up. I knew there'd be pictures to make. Pictures like the ones I'd made at the Pacific Design Center back in 2012. On that project, I'd spent 8 months at the PDC. I was free to roam where I wanted day and night. In the evening, when all the lights were turned down, the details would go away, and the shapes that remained were beautiful. So now with COVID keeping everybody apart, I started thinking how the museums of LA would look all closed up and empty. Imagine how special it would feel to be inside the big rooms with all the lights turned off. And I wanted to make pictures of that. So for a few months, I tried to find a way inside. I called and I wrote emails asking permission to slip in and shoot a story. But with the exception of the Laguna Art Museum, the answers all came back, no, sorry, no way. With no way to see inside, I started thinking what there might be to be seen on the outside. So I made a list of local museums, and I headed out to make pictures of what they looked like all closed up. What I saw in my travels was pain and sadness, of course. Our country's filled with troubles now, with disease and a mad leader sowing division, and the pain of thousands without work or places to live. Amidst all of that, museums are just a tiny bit of the story, but I think they're an important bit. That's because museums hold memories and the evidence of the times when this has happened to us before. In them, we find pictures that remind us we are not the first generation to fail at tasks too hard to do right, but that eventually we get past the pain and we figure out how to do it better. And in the course of all this, I came to see the ambition of life to make beauty goes on even now. All that crystallized for me when I went to the County Museum of Art to shoot the torn remains of its fine old buildings. I was wandering down Wilshire Boulevard shooting pictures of the ruins, and eventually I got as far as Chris Burden's lamppost, which the museum has kept functioning through all of this. I made pictures amidst the lights for a while, and I was just getting ready to call it quits when something special happened. A family celebrating a quinceañera came to make pictures of their daughter in front of the lights. They appeared out of the darkness, the girl looking like a fairy princess. Then they stopped for a minute to adjust her dress and fix her hair, and then they walked her up to the lights. They posed her before the lights, and they began to make pictures, and that moment took my breath away. They had come to celebrate her by standing with art in the middle of destruction, and in that moment, I knew again that the battle of light and darkness is always going on. I wish I had a greater part to play in fixing what's going on right now, but at 78, I'm afraid I'm more reflective than active. In my current mood, it had been easy to see signs of trouble. But until I saw the quinceañera, I'd stopped looking for signs of people persevering. After I'd seen that girl in front of the lights, though, it was easier to look for signs of life in the wreckage. So I stayed for a while making pictures. And then I headed out to make some new signs of my own. So in terms of process, in terms of creative process, I kind of come to think I have two very different processes, and one of them is more my writing process and the other one is more my photographic process. This stuff, every one of those stills shows something in common, and it's a thing that I care about a lot, which is to make a balanced image, is to make an image that always has more or less a single thing of importance. Sometimes it may be two or three people, but whatever it is, it's a thing of importance and then a balanced space for you to enjoy it. And so what I was really pleased about when we made this video was that because all of those images had been made in that way, you could move on them. All those zooms and things, those are obviously not part of the original stills, but because they began in a balanced way, you could do that and move to a tighter version of it or a piece of it or whatever. That was very pleasant.
Well, and it strikes me in watching that you're talking about the balance and sort of the technical eye that you have, which has been part of your career in the movie industry, right? But also there's that you are walking into the beautiful quinceañera. You're walking into those beautiful moments that just happened. We were talking before about you don't want to ruin the surprise. You don't want to know everything that's going to happen ahead of time. And I just get the sense that really happens how do you cultivate that? Is it curiosity? How do you cultivate that in a creative process?
You pray a lot.
Pray a lot. I love it. So that the right thing will happen.
So one of the things that photography has taught me, I'm a very antsy guy. I've changed careers 20 times. I'm always, I've been doing something for 2 years. Oh, I'm bored with this. I got to do something else. And in the movie business and in the commercial world of photography, it's important to be able to make really quick decisions. It's important to be able to walk in the room and with at least the appearance of authority say, right there, let's put it right there. And yes, and is that really the best place? Sometimes it's only the best place because somebody said that's it, and then we work all day to make that okay, now let's move the furniture, now let's do this and whatever. I sometime in the last, I guess, 10 years, I know exactly where it was. There's a mention in this video of, I spent a 7-month residency at the Pacific Design Center, which is a large architectural set of 3 buildings in Los Angeles. And they gave me complete access. I could shoot at night and during the day. And it was really great for about 2 or 3 months. And then one day I said, oh, what the hell am I gonna do now? I shot everything, you know? And then I said, well, I have a 7-month residency and I have to be here every day. So what I'm gonna do every day is I'm gonna go sit down somewhere in the building and I'm gonna wait to see what happens. And so I started to do that. And it taught me an enormous amount because the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes, nothing would happen. When I say nothing would happen, something was happening, but I wasn't there for it. And then, if I waited long enough and I got patient enough and I just watched what was going on, suddenly I would see something. And I'd say, oh. And only then would I pick up the camera. I would not look at the camera. I carried it with me, but I never picked it up and started framing shots or anything until something really told me it was time to make the pictures. And I'm going to say that told me, and I think that's really important. If you are quiet and you listen to yourself and you let that happen, something inside you will tell you when it's time to do it. So that.
Excellent, thank you. And I have a follow-up question to that, maybe, because you're such a gifted storyteller and writer. So how does that is that a completely different process for you?
Yeah, but that's not completely different. I got thrown out of 5 high schools. I never graduated. I hated writing things down. I didn't begin writing until 10 or 12 years ago. And when I did, it was because I came to realize stories were trying to tell themselves to me. And I started to listen. I said, oh, I got to write this down. Oh, that's pretty good, you know? And so I'm very much driven by that kind of inspiration. You know, it isn't, I could sit there for half an hour. This is very much a thing. Darcy, my wife, is a writer. She goes and she sits there, and it's time to work, and she works. And if that means there is no inspiration, I think she writes, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. You know, over and over again. No, I know. I don't make a plan. I don't say, oh, it would be a good idea to write a story about. Stories come to me. And when a story comes to me, I sit down and I write it. And in fact, I think that's what I'm going to do now, is read a story that was written very much that way.
Excellent.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should tell your wife. Tell your wife your story so she can write it.
Typing is not the problem. So I'm gonna read you a story that is so different from the movie that you've just seen, or the video you've just seen, and it is a story about beginning to have some understanding of the difference between intellect and intuition. At least that's how I think about it. But it's a story. The story's called Falling Apart. I was pretty fragile then. I just didn't know it. The years of drugs and party had hidden a lot of things from me. The Luma crane was a big success now, and I was the guy who made it work. I brought it to sets, showed crews how to use it, and sometimes operated the shots. For a couple of years, I was the indispensable man, the only guy in Hollywood who could make the magic tool do its magic trick. All that had come home to me while working on NBC's Friday Night Fights, an 80s reboot. They loved us because we could start at the back of the audience and go sailing right over the ring, giving viewers a sense of excitement. Every Wednesday, Cousin George and I would drive our truck from LA to Las Vegas and set it up in Caesar's Palace. On Thursday, we would set up the crane, interface it with the TV cameras and monitors, and work out the inevitable kinks. Then we would rehearse the new shots the director wanted to try. Friday afternoons, we made sure everything was ready, doing the long countdown live TV requires. And on Friday night, we went live, broadcasting to an audience all over America. It was as exciting as you can imagine. Get it right or die in front of 1 million people. I loved it. Saturday mornings, we packed it all up and drove back to LA. Then on Mondays and Tuesdays, we worked on movies or got high. On Wednesdays, we drove back to Vegas again. I was making money and having fun. So on one of those Thursday mornings, we're setting up the crane when Don Ohlmeyer comes over and pulls me aside for a chat. Don is running NBC Sports then, and he doesn't like paying me so much money to build the crane and stand by while his crew runs it. He wants his crew to build the crane and run it, and he wants me to go away and leave his payroll behind. I was truly shocked. Until now, nobody had ever suggested I might not be necessary to keep this complicated machinery alive. Tendrils of fear ran through me to my core. Somehow, though, I knew what to say. Out of nowhere came, "Okay, Don, I'll tell you what. Your crew doesn't know how to do it, so I'll make you a bet. Next week, I'll get in the truck and drive it here for free. Then I'll sit on my hands and your guys can put the crane together. And if your luck is good, maybe they'll get it done without damaging anything, and maybe it'll work. And I won't charge you a dime. But if there's any kind of problem, I'm going to have to step in, and it's going to get expensive. It's going to get real expensive." Don stared at me for a moment, measuring the truth of what I was saying, and then he walked away, because don't get between me and my rice bowl. So if you knew me then, I was cocky and ready to meet a challenge, but the guy inside was a different person. Inside, I was living with insecurities, an emptiness I used to describe as being the hole at the center of the donut. There was a shiny facade, but no me inside. I came face to face with that emptiness a short time later. There was a commercial production company I did a lot of work for, people I really liked, first class in every way. We were working on a bid for a big package of commercials for a worldwide client. It involved flying the Luma everywhere, doing amazing shots in faraway places, then packing it up and moving to the next country. It was complicated, and I was working with the producers on shipping and voltages and different video systems, that kind of stuff. Then one Friday afternoon, the phone rang, and it was the producer I'd been working with. She told me they had just gotten word the project was not going to happen. And then she said, "Andy, I called you first because you've been so totally pro. I thought I owed it to you to let you know first." I thanked her, and I hung up, and emotions started flooding into my body. Overcome by praise, I broke down crying, not sure why, but filled with way more than I could handle. And then I knew what to do. I got a tank of nitrous oxide, a bag of cocaine, and a bottle of whiskey. No calls to friends, no party time, just me soothing the pain of praise. This is one of those weekends I could have died. Nitrous, cocaine, and whiskey round and round while I wept, overcome that someone thought I had value. Feelings I couldn't bear filled me until I blacked out, and when I woke up, I started cranking away again. That pain I had carried inside of me for years, hidden by what I thought was emptiness, was suddenly released after years of confinement. It was hungry to be in the world. It wasn't going to go back into hiding anymore. I survived, but I was changed. Now I knew something new about myself, even if I didn't understand it. I pondered those feelings over and over. Why had I cried? Why did someone I admired's praise affect me so strongly? What was this pain? What could I do about it? In the aftermath of that weekend, I spent years becoming comfortable with the pain that had been too big for a small boy. It led me to write stories of living unknowingly, the things I did when mind and heart were strangers to each other. Sometimes even now, the pain guides me to a fresh memory, and then I know it's my opportunity to write something down for you and me to think about. But this revelation was the first story I ever told myself about what was inside of me. I let myself in on the secret almost 50 years ago, and I've been coming back to it ever since. One morning, this story came back to me and asked to be told this way, so I wrote it down in one mad rush, and here it is. It's interesting what hides inside. That's the first time this story's ever been told. When I was invited to come here, and I started thinking about things, we'll do this and this and this, and I said, well, I gotta go look for something. I went into my drafts, and I found this one. I wrote this 3-4 years ago, and it was waiting. So here it is. Yeah.
We feel super honored to have its inaugural reading here. Thank you so much. And what a wonderful example. Well, I love how you just, like you say, it's something to talk about between you and me. Your writing always feels like stories you've been meaning to tell us, right?
Yeah.
Like a conversation. I love that. And I love too how you talk about that your heart and mind didn't know each other.
Yes.
But then you have such insight and introspection. It's really wonderful.
50 years.
50 years.
But I'm almost 82, so the first 32 years, not the same. Yeah. So I didn't want to just talk and you guys sit here forever. So have we raised any questions so far? Is there anything anybody wants to talk about?
Yeah, when did you start doing the Route 66 thing?
I wrote a story. Speaking of writing stories, where's my bag? I want to hold up a book. Jordan, over, yeah. Jordan, to your right, yeah.
I knew you before that.
You're familiar. Who are you?
50 years ago we met.
Am I in trouble now?
It's a little more than.
Am I in trouble now? So when I started writing stories, I started writing short stories, and I would say, people would say, your stories are really cool. You really ought to write a book, because a lot of them are about crazy stuff, stealing motorcycles and getting in trouble and getting thrown out of schools and living with the hog farm and all that. And I would say, no, I write short stories. I don't have any big vision. My wife and my daughter write big vision stuff. They write a thing with a huge arc. But then, after writing short stories for 6-7 years, I kind of looked up and I said, I've got about 60 or 70 of these things, and they do kind of fit together. Maybe I've written a book. So I got an editor and spent a year working on making a book, on writing a book that would take all that stuff into telling, but would also be about the things that happened after. It was so easy for me to tell bad boy stuff. I could tell bad boy stories forever, and I was just embarrassed. Just.
At one time.
My one time lasted a long time. But I had a terrible time talking about being successful, and that ultimately happened. And I had to find some way to talk about that stuff and not just brag about it, So I did that. I wrote this book, and it has all of those stories in it, except the one you guys just heard. Yeah. So, another question?
What from your childhood has carried forward? As you reflect back in your writings now?
My childhood was marked by the death of my father when I was 7 years old. It is, the single thing that that created the arc of my life, or at least the beginning arc of my life. And I, at that moment, in that first moment, I became ungovernable. No one could tell me what to do. No one could tell me anything at all. I gave my mother so much trouble. Some of that's in here. I got thrown out of 5 high schools. I was in trouble from 7 till probably 30 or something like that. But more directly to answer your question, I don't have anything. I really didn't. I didn't carry memory with me. I didn't learn. I didn't. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you learn how to write?
Ha! I didn't learn how to write. I just started writing stuff down. And sometimes I would say, Darcy, please read this story. And she would say, fix this, this, and this. But never more than say, fix this, this, and this. And I would go back. I don't know how to write. I don't know anything about the technical process of writing. Thank you. Thank you. What I know is a different thing. And it's something I just got it. I know how to tell a story. I know that thing. And so it's just a question of kind of
Getting out of the way.
And the first part of it is, yes, the first part of it is I don't write until I'm inspired to write. And that is not what a writer does. A writer gets up and writes. I haven't written, I worked on this a little bit this week, but I haven't written in a couple of months now. Because I started reading what I was writing. I said, I really ought to write something. And I read, this is terrible. Because it's not about it's not about what's in my heart. It's not about something that wakes me up and says, let's talk about this now. Yeah. Should we look at one more thing?
Darcy has an insight.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's not exactly a question. I just wanted to say that you also took advantage of the openness of the internet to write stories.
Yes.
And publish them, which I thought was kind of extraordinary. From the beginning, really.
Yeah.
There was a place to put them, and he wrote them and he published them until there was enough to make a book of. And really learning the process of doing that, I think.
Totally true.
What worked.
Totally true. If any of you here are interested in writing short stories or things like that, I started writing on something called Medium, and it's free, or you can pay $5 a month, and it's a place, where you can put your stuff down. I think it's important. I think it's really important for any kind of an artist, visual or written, to constantly put yourself out in front of people, unless you think you're only doing it for yourself. But if you have any desire, to eventually have something be seen, to be heard, to be understood, then you have to begin early, because the old system is broken. The old system of publishing is broken. The old system of galleries is broken. There's 1 million books a year being published right now. Most of them never sell but 25 or 50 copies. You know how many billions of photographs are made every day, and they live on people's phones. Or isn't a baby cute? But if you want to do more than that, if you want to make comment on the world, or anything at all like that, then it's important early on, or even right now today, if it's not early on, to begin that process and not to wait for some gallery to invite you. I mean, I've had a bunch of gallery shows. I've had a few museum things. But it is on us to tell our own stories and find other people who want to do that as well, and make a community that does that. Did I answer anything at all?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you still changing jobs every 2 years?
Kinda.
What are you up to now?
So I am 82, or I'll be 82 in a month. And I worked until I was at a company called Panavision for probably 15 years or so. I worked in gas stations. I built motorcycles. I did 100 things like that. I worked with my hands, and that's an important thing, I think, to do that if that stuff moves you. And I got into the movie business. I shot stills, and then I got in the movie business, and I worked in production, and then I went to work for Panavision the first time, and I lasted about 1.5 years or 2 years. They said, "We want to make you a marketing guy." I said, "No, I'm getting out of here." So I left, and I started a video production company, and then, oh God, it's a long story, but we ended up, the video production company acquired some very high technology remote cranes as rental objects, and then we sold that business to Panavision, and then I came back in as the president of a division, and that was more to my liking. So I stayed for a while. I stayed for 10 or 15 years. I worked with that guy sitting right there, Frank Kay. And then I left, and I had a non-compete, so I couldn't work for a year, but another guy, another big rental company called me the day that was announced that I was leaving Panavision and said, "Andy, come to work for us." And I said, "I can't for a year." He said, "Then mark your date, and on the first date, come work for us." So I did another 18 months of that. And that takes me into mid-70s, is that true?
Oh, age-wise.
Age-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sort of mid-70s. And by that time, I was writing for a number of online publications because I said I only write these short stories, but that's not true. I also write about photography. I write about, not about the technical aspects of photography, but about about shows, about gallery shows, and about photographers' work, and that sort of stuff. But that is also stuff. I never took an assignment. I had a wonderful situation with a French publication called L'Oeil de la Photographie, who liked my work enough to say, "Whatever you want to do, whenever you write a story, we will publish it." That kind of makes you say, "Oh, I think I ought to do something," And now I have that same thing with a motorcycle publication called Vintagent, where I write about motorcycles and about the people who make them, always about the people who make them. So it's slowly evolving. These videos, I started making those in 2020. I just got on Substack, and I'm about to start putting stuff out on TikTok. So you got to keep it fresh.
Can we access those videos? Can we access those videos now, or not till TikTok?
Can you access them? Yes.
Oh, I beg for you to access them. Nobody leaves until they've got them in their phones. Yeah. Afterwards, I'll be happy to give you information and whatever. Of course, I'd be pleased if you'd look at it. So, should we look at another one? What did I say we were going to do next? We're gonna watch a video. Okay, yes. I want to show you another one. This one started out as a story published on Medium, I think. Yes, published on Medium, and it was about a trip that I took to Kansas. And I didn't know anything about Kansas, but you'll hear that. But this is exactly what I started talking about when I first started talking about the importance of not knowing, the importance of coming to a thing absolutely fresh and without any kind of conception if you possibly can. So that's what this one's about. The light is good here. In October, the sun is not directly overhead. There are long mornings and deep afternoons when the sun gives shape to the landscape. There are fields and rolling hills and miles of dirt road that take you to places little seen. There are towns, hundreds of them, each with its own main street, and houses that spread out for a few blocks, each unique in its own way, all alike in that they are shrinking. Hi, I'm Andy Romanoff. I'm a photographer and a writer. I'm reading a story called Picturing Kansas. Kansas came to life, its American white man's life, in the mid-1800s. Pushing the Indians aside, the new American settlers tore up the prairie, then put down railroad tracks and built small settlements. Places where farmers could bring their grain and send their children off to school. The towns prospered as long as farming was the work of families and muscle supplied the labor. Then machines came and farming got bigger, the work of combines and capital, and the small farmer was pushed aside. We like the results, we city people. Cheap food and plenty of it was a lot more visible to us than the farmers leaving their land, and the towns slowly shrinking. Over time, the unplanned economy worked in its unplanned way. Where there is no work and no meaning, the people drift away. The ones who stayed had something that still held them, family maybe, or love of the land, or a job that could still be had. Today, the evidence of that past is visible everywhere, and knowing the story tinges this beauty with sadness. I like to begin a story knowing nothing, feeling my way around. So I came to Kansas without much study. I wandered the landscape and took pictures without knowing what they represented. But soon enough patterns began to emerge, and conversations with strangers began to fill the vast space of my ignorance. From nothing, I came to know just a little bit more, what I could see in a week, and what I gathered from my new friends and learned in books. So these words and pictures are only the first results, what I got for poking around a little. This isn't a definitive statement, just a pin on the map. Kansas is where the prairie begins. In the old days, it swept west from here for hundreds of miles. It was a sea of grass so high that the early travelers walked for days without seeing where they were going. They talked of it as an ocean to be endured, and it unsettled them. I didn't know any of that when I first saw it, only that I was standing in the middle of a living thing different than any I had ever known. Dotting the landscape are tiny towns that offer respite from the road. They're quiet, shady, and they only go on for a few blocks. Between the towns, there are thousands of miles of dirt road, a mesh that connects the people to the fields and to one another. Wheat is grown here, and milo, soybeans and corn. The entire state is crisscrossed by dirt roads so farmers can get their crops to town and to market. In the towns, there are grain elevators and storage silos. I came to know that when I saw a silo on the horizon, pretty soon I'd be coming to a town. And when you come to a town, you find railroad tracks, and soon enough you'll probably see a train. All over Kansas, if you sit quiet for a while, you'll hear the sound of a train somewhere in the distance. And any place the train stops, you'll still find life. But if the train passes a town without stopping, then life is only hanging on. This is the Volans store. It's an art gallery set in a ghost town about 8 miles from the nearest living village. Until the 60s, the train stopped here, but after that, it just kept on going. The Volans store is a uniquely Kansas treasure, an abandoned building far from anything. It was saved from destruction, restored and repurposed. It sits alone in the fields, far from people, but it draws life to itself with its sense of purpose. If Kansas is going to be reborn, this is one of the seeds from which the new life will spring. Where people have lived is where they stay when they die. If you drive the 2 lanes across Kansas, you'll see small cemeteries set by the side of the road. When you stop and wander among the headstones, you'll find tiny bits of people's lives. But the land that surrounds the grave tells their stories too. There is a desolate beauty here, with little artifice and no make-believe. The winds blow and the light fades, and there's no one around to interrupt you in your thinking. Places here invite reflection, silent towns surrounded by fields and sky. Being here, I was sobered by the occasional glimpse of our place in the scheme of things. Only 2 years in the 1860s, that's all the time the Pony Express lasted. But its imprint on American consciousness remains even today. This Pony Express station stands alone in its bit of prairie as it did when it was new. Now the surrounding prairie is gone. Civilization surrounds the station further than the prairie ever did. But if you stand here on a quiet afternoon and don't look too close, you may feel what the ones who lived here in the first days felt. The land sweeping away to infinity, the sky going on forever, and their feet planted firmly on the ground. Any questions?
Who's that actor that plays you in the film?
He's a much younger guy.
Not a question, but I just want to tell you, your photography moves me. Wow.
Thank you.
You know how to capture, I know nothing about photography, but I was so drawn in.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to say, part of the reason for that is I had the enormous good fortune to work with yet another guy who had been a Panavision guy and had left, Mo Shore, who was listed as the editor. I didn't have time to sit here and to make all the decisions about these. I had to make 5 of these in 5 weeks. I handed this to Mo, and he chose the music, and he created the patterns, and Mo is one of the most soulful people I know. And, I get the pleasure. Yeah.
Well, doubling up on what Kim said, I've never wanted to go to Kansas.
Can I tell you what a pleasure it is? And I understand, they are not us, although I don't know who us is in this room. But I found the people of Kansas, to be enormously welcoming. Those women in that shop, I'll tell you a story. I got a piece of pie and some coffee. We talked. I said, "Can I take pictures?" Yes, of course. My traveling companion is a guy named Bob Harvey. He's an actor. He's been in a lot of movies, never more than one line. But, you might know his face. And they said, "You look familiar." And when they found out Bob was an actor and they started looking up his pictures, I can't tell you. They don't get a lot of actors in small towns in Kansas. When I left, I said, I love this pie. It was a gooseberry pie. It was a gooseberry pie. And it was fresh, made from there. I said, I really love this. Did you ever ship it? And she said, no, but I'll ship it for you. And she wouldn't let me pay for it. And they sent me a pie, showed up at the house. Go to Kansas, enjoy yourself. Yeah. Was it another? No.
Do you still travel?
Every time I can. I love the road. I love the road. I don't want to spend 50 weeks a year on the road. But in that same way of not knowing, the road is a place of not knowing. You know, every time you go down the road, something new happens. And I love that. Yeah. You not so much?
My heart breaks down. Or I meet people that are not quite so friendly as the people from Kansas.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I just attract them.
Well, yes.
So that, I was thinking about how you like to go into things and find the surprise. And are you that way with people as well? Because I feel that was just captured in those photos of those women, is that, right, you were capturing them, not your idea of them, or, and does that, in your writing, it's like people you run into are almost like a cast of characters. They're interesting and they're wonderful, and is that because you're going in without preconceived notions?
I find, you know, I've been enormously lucky. I find people interesting. And in particular, you know, because you've read some of my stuff, my life is peopled by a cast of characters, like carnies, and they're not down the middle. They're not all, but many of them people that.
I take offense.
What was it?
You're on the fringe.
Yeah. But also in terms of how is it you meet a lot of people? Ask my son, ask my daughter. Don't, Dad. Don't walk over there. But I do. I'll start a conversation with anybody.
Yeah. Kids always try to make you stop that, don't they?
When did you meet your wife?
Oh boy, I met Darcy at a union meeting, motion picture but the motion picture workers union in 1970, come on.
72.
Maybe, yeah.
73.
Yeah.
Was that still your bad boy days?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Was that still your bad boy days?
Yeah. Now, we didn't get married for 10 years because she would not marry me. Okay, so, you know, I had a little bit of growing up to do still.
Yeah, that wedding happened after the story that he read you today.
And on that story that you read us today, it's a lot of what you described. It sounds like you really have become a master of living in the moment. And I'm guessing that's not still due to cocaine, nitrous, and what, Maker's Mark? Is there something, you know, some other type of practice or something that led you to this, you know, real, almost meditative kind of way? Well, that's a big question, huh?
I was so not this person. So not this person. You guys would not. Okay, guy I worked for, the first guy who hired me at Panavision was a man named Jack Holzman. Jack Holzman was the founder of Elektra Records and None Such Records, a sophisticated Hollywood guy. For a complex set of reasons, I'm not going to tell you this story. Jack said, Andy, come to work at Panavision. And I came there to do one job, which was to take care of this remote control crane. But within 3 weeks, he almost immediately, there was an executive lunchroom. I was not an executive. It was an executive lunchroom. And he said, I want you to come into the executive lunch every day and sit at the table. It had a round table with seats for 15. They'd invite big cinematographers, very famous, sometimes directors, and 8 or 10 executives. And the Panavision executives had, you know, they didn't have a guaranteed seat at the table except for 2 or 3 of them. But I had a guaranteed seat. I was supposed to be in there 5 days. I didn't know why, and I didn't ask for a while, but then one day I finally asked, Jack, what was that about? He said, you were the only one there who wasn't on the inside. You'd tell me the truth. So he's that kind of a sophisticated and smart guy. Jack once said to Darcy, what is it? Help me here. Andy is like a chicken on meth.
Runs around like a
Runs around like a chicken on meth.
It's not good. Oh, okay. Very productive.
Yeah. So I was not this guy. I was just enormously lucky that I lived long enough to start to slow down. A person that I know beats me really hard if I don't pay attention, you know. And so I started to pay some attention. Children helped me to pay attention. Business helped me to pay attention. And then when I got finished with all that and came back out and started to do the things that I wanted to do, because now I knew things that I wanted to do, yeah, I was slowed down a little bit. Yeah. God, thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. You've been a really, listening and thoughtful audience, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a delight to see you and to hear your stories again as well. And I don't know if you think that this is a challenge. Well, and maybe you just did it, but because you spin language beautifully, if you sort of had one piece of creative advice, like in a sentence, what would it be?
Well, so my first question then is, who here does some creative thing? Writing, painting, photography? 2, 3, 4, okay. I got away with this line once before, and I'm going to say it again. Follow your heart. Be smart about it. Follow your heart. What choice do we have? We're here, and we're not here. Enjoy yourself.